this nonsense, homelessness and all this other garbage y'all talk about, police violence and all this stuff, don't nobody care about that. Don't nobody real care about that. We care about our reparations. And we have to put white people on notice that we want our reparations. That our foreparents and us, we didn't work for free and underpaid and all this nonsense. And the white folks get away with it. And they talk about the great city they're building. No, we want our reparations. $3 million per person. $3 million per person right here in this city. That's the only thing black people got to care about. All this other little nonsense y'all talk about, we do not care about.
40 acres and a mule. This phrase is derived from General William T. Sherman's Special Field Order issued during the American Civil War in 1865. The order was intended to address the immediate needs of formerly enslaved people. This is basically providing freed African American enslaved with mules and plots of land to help them transition from slavery to freedom. Under Special Field Order, approximately 400,000 acres of land along the southeastern coast, primarily in South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, were set aside for redistribution to freed slaves. The order also authorized the provision of surplus army mules to assist them in working the land. The idea behind this policy was to provide freed slaves with a means of self-sufficiency and economic independence. However, the promise of 40 acres and a mule was short-lived. The order was never officially enacted into law, and its implementation faced significant opposition from various factions. Some white landowners who had initially lost their land during the Civil War sought to reclaim their property. President Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Abraham Lincoln after his assassination, opposed land redistribution and sought to restore the pre-war social order. Ultimately, President Johnson ordered the return of the land to the original white landowners, effectively overturning Sherman's order. As a result, the promise of 40 acres and a mule was not fulfilled, and African Americans were denied access to the land and economic opportunities that were initially envisioned. The failure to fulfill this promise represented a missed opportunity to address the historical injustices faced by African Americans and to provide them with a pathway to economic empowerment and self-determination. It is worth noting that the United States has taken certain steps towards acknowledging injustices and has provided reparations in certain cases in the past. For example, in 1988, the U.S. government passed the Civil Liberties Act, which provided reparations to Japanese Americans who were forcibly interned during World War II. Each eligible individual received a payment of $20,000 as reparations for their internment and the violation of their civil rights. The Act also established the Civil Liberties Public Education Fund to educate the public about the internment and its implications. Also, the United States provided reparations to Jewish individuals who were victims of the Holocaust during World War II. Following the end of the war, various compensation and restitution programs were established to compensate for the loss of property, livelihoods, and human rights violations suffered by Jewish Holocaust survivors. The United States, along with other nations, recognized the moral obligation to support those who had suffered immense trauma and loss during the Holocaust. All these were done despite the fact the United States not being responsible for the Holocaust, but they paid reparations anyways. Recognizing the need to support and restore the dignity of those who were victims of an unprecedented crime against humanity. Meanwhile, reparations for descendants of African Americans have been a subject of continuous debate and discussion in the United States. It is an open secret the civil rights of African American slaves and their descendants have been violated throughout American history. Slavery itself was a fundamental violation of human rights, where African Americans were forcibly enslaved, treated as property, and denied basic rights and freedoms. Even after the abolition of slavery, African Americans continued to face systemic discrimination and the violation of their civil rights. The Jim Crow era which spanned from the late 19th century to the mid-20th century, was characterized by state and local laws that enforced racial segregation and perpetuated racial discrimination in various aspects of life, including educations, housing, voting rights, and public economies. African Americans were subjected to widespread violence, including lynching and other forms of racial terrorism, which further violated their civil rights and perpetuated a climate of fear and oppression. They were also denied equal protection under the law, facing unequal treatment in the criminal justice system and limited access to economic opportunities, education, and political participation. Is their trauma not traumatic enough, or subtle racism is in play here? But however way it is, the grievances of the descendants of enslaved African Americans are justified. Whether the reparation is paid or not, there is need to progress towards social justice, and racial equality is a collective effort that requires persistence, resilience, and collaboration. Kindly leave your opinion in the comments section. Kindly support the channel by subscribing and like the video. Thank you.